I don't think it would be that controversial to say that Kiriko is by far the worst character that was ever introduced to Overwatch. And I say that as someone who, before her introduction, had finally grown to like literally every support in the game. Baptiste used to be the only support I wasn't a fan of, and while I still have my problems with him, the longer I did give him a chance, the more I warmed up to him. I still definitely don't really like Immortality Field in the game, and I generally don't want support to become an all-aim, no-brain kind of role, but I couldn't lie, there definitely was some depth to Baptiste. Kiriko, on the other hand, I think is the worst hero we have ever allowed into this game. Now, just for context, I'm a bit of a jack of all trades when it comes to this game. I play a bit of everyone. Obviously, there are characters I play more of than others. I play mostly tank and support, with DPS being my least played role. My most played character is Ana, shortly followed by Brig and Wrecking Ball. And there are only a small handful of characters I don't really play, mostly being Junkrat, Hanzo, and Widowmaker. While there are also other characters in the DPS role who I don't have a lot of playtime on, a lot of them have at least made an effort to really learn, like Genji, and although I don't think I naturally have the skill set to mesh with the character, I do feel like I at least know what I'm supposed to be doing on the character, and I have mixed results with them. Either way, that's just to say that I don't really feel like I'm being biased here. If anything, I have all the reason to be biased in favor of Kiriko, considering support is my most played role, and I really thought she might have been an exciting new addition to the game when she first came out. I genuinely thought I might be a Kiriko main when she was first added to the game. She did feel weird and off to me at first, but I thought that was just, I'm just not used to Overwatch 5v5. I'm just not used to the new support. It'll grow on me. And I didn't realize just how much I was going to come to despise this character. And the worst part is, it's not just that I despise dealing with her, like most people do, for good reason, but also that I don't even like playing her. So, unfortunately, there are some contrarian Kiriko defenders out there, even though it seems most people can recognize that this character contributes nothing but harm to the game. But for those few contrarians, I guess let's go over the main problems with Kiriko. First of all, is just quite frankly, Kiriko can literally shut down any aggressive play that any character in the entire game can make at any time, with absolutely zero skill involved, and on top of that, oftentimes not only deny that character from getting value from their dives, but often punish them for even attempting them, and all they need is to have their cooldowns available. If they have teleport and Suzu, you can be a Winston jumping on top of a half-health soldier crouching for his life in the corner of a room with no help, and then Kiriko can teleport through 5 sets of walls, drop a Suzu on top of the soldier's head, having to full health before the invincibility frames end, and now this Winston is suddenly 2v1ing a Kiriko pocketing a soldier, when before he was about to jump on top of someone who would have exploded in a second flat with absolutely no way of fighting back. This is not the Winston's fault. This is not the Winston making a misplay. This is not the Winston, you should have seen that one coming, mate. You should have known that Kiriko was going to TP through 5 sets of walls, drop an ability to instantly set the soldier to full health and give him temporary invincibility, and then also you were going to get kunai to death before you could even get out, before your jump was ready again. You should have known that was going to happen. Because, quite frankly, there's just no way to know it's going to happen. Unless you literally know where the Kiriko is at all times, and let's be real, sometimes you're not going to know, and it's not just because, you got poor awareness, you got bad game sense. Sometimes it's just going to be, well, the Kiriko's somewhere, I don't know where, hope they're not in TP range. They're in TP range. Well, guess I die now. And yes, I will back up the idea that this takes zero skill on the Kiriko's part, considering pressing teleport is pressing a button, and pressing Suzu is looking at the ground and pressing a button. I don't really consider that skill, per se. This is a situation which not only punishes a tank for making the correct play, or even a DPS if they're a Genji or something like that instead of a Winston, but on top of that, it's a situation with zero counterplay. What is the counterplay to the target I was about to kill got Suzu'd and now I'm going to die for it? For most things in the game which have near no counterplay, you at least have line of sight. You at least have the potential to maybe boop or at least force someone into an area where, wow, thankfully there's a wall here between them and their supports, so they can't just hit their instant save you for free button. But in the case of Suzu, because Kiriko has teleport, they can just bend the rules. They can just say, fuck that. Yeah, you may have positioned yourself awfully. Yeah, you may have had the foresight to put this guy in a position where he cannot be seen by any of his supports. Yeah, you might have done everything perfectly, but I'm going to press 2 buttons now, and now, they're full health. The only counterplay to Kiriko's Suzu is quite simply to kill someone while it's on cooldown. And the hilarious part is there are people that will unironically argue, yeah, Exactly. So it's balanced. And yeah, Kiriko is balanced in the greatest, most enormous quotation marks that have ever been invented in human history. In that, yeah, technically, Kiriko does have a very slightly negative win rate, even at higher skill tiers. This video isn't supposed to be saying that Kiriko is a free win button, because honestly, she isn't. I don't even believe that, despite how much I'm going to complain about her. But that's honestly even worse. At least then she'd be fun to play as. No, Kiriko is a character that is an unkillable god with absolutely no counterplay to anything she does, so long as her buttons are available, but near useless the second that her buttons aren't available. And you can't do anything to make your buttons more available. They're either just available or they aren't. And you don't have control of that. The game has control of that. But getting back to this example anyway, not only is it ludicrous to call it healthy counterplay, that it's okay for a support to be able to save someone no matter where they are, no matter if they're behind multiple walls, no matter if they are 1 HP, no matter if there's 10 people collapsing on them, just by pressing 2 buttons, they can save their life instantly for free. But I mean, okay, let's address this more thoroughly. It's quite obvious from any normal person's glance this is not healthy, but there are going to be people who will unironically argue it is. Suzu already has a 15-second cooldown, which is honestly ludicrously forgiving considering it's a cooldown ability which counters ultimates. Junker Queen Rampage, one of the most expensive and slow-charging ultimates in the game, but at least enormously impactful when you finally get it. 1 Suzu shuts the whole thing down. Rhine Earth Shatter, 1 Suzu, the whole thing's been shut down. Even Graviton Surge, obviously it doesn't shut down a grav, but I very rarely manage to close out a kill on anyone in a grav if when I'm just about to get them to 1 health, the Kiriko that's caught in the grav just Suzus and shoots them back up to full health before the invincibility frames even end. Gravitic Flux, just 1 Suzu usage and now that's getting 0 kills. And this ability, which has this much strength packed into it, only has a 15-second cooldown. Now, let's use Winston as an example again. Winston's jump has a 6-second cooldown. This means even if he's going in and out as fast as he possibly can, each dive has a 12-second gap in between. He has to wait 6 seconds to get in and 6 seconds to get out. And again, that's assuming he jumps the moment the button is available. And while not every dive tank is the exact same, most of them operate on a similar timer of being able to do a dive once every about 12 seconds minimum. So that means there is literally a 3-fucking-second window if you want to start a dive, but then have your dive forced out by a Suzu, and then have to get out, get healed again, and get back in before the Suzu is available again. You have a 3-fucking-second window. Good luck trying to kill anyone in 3 seconds as Winston when you're the first one to jump in. And even if you're able to do that, second support walks in and they use Immortality Fuel or Life Grip or whatever they have and fill in that slot where the Suzu wasn't there. You'd think the answer to this would be, well, just kill the Kiriko then first. And in a sane world, that would be the answer, but we don't live in a sane world in the world of Overwatch. We live in the world of Overwatch. Kiriko is not only the smallest hitbox character in the game with the most effective AD strafes that even the most skillful of players have a lot of trouble just landing shots on, but on top of that, as if that wasn't enough, she also has the ability to get high ground for free whenever she wants with Wall-climb, meaning an instant escape without having to use any resources anytime she wants if she's ever near high ground against a character that can't follow her up there. But on top of all that bullshit, she of course can not only Suzu herself, but also teleport away at any time at the press of a button on a only 7-second cooldown. What the fuck? So we're talking about a character that is harder to shoot than any other character in the game, with the support passive, mind you, for health regeneration if you ever spend longer than 1.5 seconds not shooting her, who is able to grant herself invincibility whenever she wants at the press of a button every 15 seconds, who can wall climb, who also gets an ability every 7 fucking seconds that she can just press to instantly leave a battle and just say, well, fuck you, you're about to kill me, and by all means, you outskilled me in this interaction, but my teammate is through that wall over there and I'm going to press this button and instantly get out for free. I didn't have to execute any movement mechanics. I didn't have to line up any difficult shots. I didn't have to do anything like that. I just had to press a single button on my keyboard, and now I am completely safe. So what now then? If the Kiriko is practically unkillable, but if you don't kill her, then she can literally shut down any dive she wants at the press of a button, what do you do about that? Well, the answer is not much, but genuinely, I think the best you can do is, despite how fucking unfair it is and how much the odds are stacked against you, still just focus the Kiriko. At the end of the day, Jesus Christ, do I hate saying this, because it almost makes it sound like I think this is fair when I don't. But at the end of the day, the best bet you have of ever killing a Kiriko is to simply all in on her, non-stop, without ever ceasing to focus all your resources on her, just to deal with this one fucking support, just so that you can kill her. Because at the end of the day, for as much as I'm complaining about all the ways she can get out of a fight for completely free, at the end of the day, she will eventually run out of teleports. If she's having to non-stop Suzu teleport, wall climb teleport, eventually she will run out of escapes. Eventually, she will wall climb up somewhere to escape from one person and bump right into another person and die to them. It will happen eventually. But seriously, I wouldn't be surprised if the amount of times a Kiriko should die before they actually die is somewhere around 5 or 6. It feels like you essentially have to effectively outplay a Kiriko around 5 or 6 times to get a kill on them once. And then, isn't it just hilarious, after all that torture that Kiriko puts you through, that it's not even like she's a defenseless little bean either? Kiriko has the highest burst damage out of all supports in the game. She can 2-tap anyone she wants with just 2 quick kunai headshots, and the kunais are near silent as well. So sometimes you will just burst die out of nowhere and not even know how you died, only to see there was a Kiriko standing behind you that teleported her way over there, and just think, oh, dead. And maybe you just didn't notice because you were in the middle of fighting someone else, and you were like, whoa, that person can't delete my health bar that fast. Where did all my health go? Oh, there was a Kiriko behind me. Would have been nice if the game played the sounds correctly, but recently the game's been having sound bugs, and with Kiriko that's especially bad. And even when the sound isn't bugged, Kiriko's sound effects are in general quite quiet. Okay, so that's how awful it feels to play against Kiriko, but hey, is she at least fun to play as? Oh boy. Listen, I know fun is subjective and all, but I feel like there are some things we can somewhat objectively measure about fun, and I do not fucking understand you if you think that Kiriko is a fun character to play. Ultimately, though, this is the angle I'm going to attack this from. I do not say this just to put down Kiriko players. I mean this sincerely. I have a bit of a hot take when it comes to Kiriko. And maybe it's just because of my perspective, where I'm very much someone who has never really been super focused on the aim aspect of the game, has always been focused more on the strategy and all that. And maybe it's just because I appreciate support positioning so much, and Kiriko is the only support in the game that just says, fuck your positioning rules. I have like 5 different ways to instantly press a button and escape certain death for free, so I don't have to care about your positioning rules. But honestly, I will fully stick to this. I think that Kiriko might just be the single lowest skill character in the game for an average player. Now, we'll add these asterisks. I think there are different ways you can assess lowest skill characters. I think if you're talking about skill floor, like what character, if you gave a completely clueless, never played the game before kind of player, would they do the best on? And I think for that situation, it's Mercy. You could also say, what about the character that has the least potential for you to push them? Like if you got some theoretically perfect player that could do everything all the time perfectly, what character would they do the worst with? And I think the answer to that one is Moira. But I think somewhere in the middle of that slider lies Kiriko. I think this is considered a hot take because Kiriko's always had this sort of air of almost mysticism, this air of skill and austereness around this whole idea that she's the high skill support. She's the ones where you gotta land your headshots. She is so difficult. But let me start with this first question. Can you think of anything that Kiriko does that requires skill other than kunai headshots? Healing auto-aims. Teleporting is pressing a button. Suzuing is pressing a button. Yes, you technically have to, in big air quotes, aim the Suzu, but the Suzu not only has a large splash radius, so even if you miss, it will still catch people, but on top of that, Suzu is often most useful on yourself or the tank. If you're throwing it on yourself, you just look at the floor and throw it. You don't even have to aim, you just have to throw it at the floor. If you're using it on the tank, then Jesus Christ, if you're missing a Roadhog with your Suzus, then you're beyond my help. There is such a thing as skillful Suzus. Once or twice, I have been running back from spawn, seeing one of my DPS running away on critical health, and yeeted a Suzu through the air and gotten the angle arc correct so that it lands on them from a mile away and saves them at the last second. And don't get me wrong, that feels good. That's also something I've done like 1, maybe 2 times in my entire like 30 hours or so of playing KIRIKO. So, okay, maybe the only thing KIRIKO does that takes skill is kunai headshots. But kunai headshots are hard, right? They're really difficult, aren't they? I'm not going to say they're not difficult, and I'm not going to say that skill isn't a factor. But also, let's be real. A lot of kunai headshots is luck. The main thing that prevents kunai headshots from being the kind of thing that people who are just good enough land every time, like, you know, headshots with hit scans, is the fact that kunais take time to reach their target. That means it's not just click on the head, it's click on where the head is going to be in about 2 seconds. And if you're dealing with a player who clearly has an intention, and you read their intention, and as a result know where they want to go and throw the kunai where they're about to go, that takes skill. Here's the problem. That is not 90% of kunai headshots. 90% of kunai headshots is you teleport next to someone, and then you jump on top of them, and you start flailing and flinging them all over the place, and that person obviously panics, starts spamming left, right, up, down, left, and when you land headshots there, you're not landing headshots because you're like, yes, I have studied your movements, and I am certain that you are going to press WAAADS WWWD, meaning that your head is going to be here in approximately 0.73 seconds. No, you're like, the head's in that general area. Throw. Oh, okay, we finally landed some. Okay, there we go. And the best part is, because you got the tiniest hitbox in the game, you can get away with missing like 5 shots in a row and still kill someone so long as you get that one headshot. And even if you can't get away with it, even if that DPS actually is going to aim real good, even when they're panicked, and even manage to land all their shots, then you just TP out. And once again, TPing is pressing a single fucking button, not exactly super skillful. So then you might say, okay, maybe kunai's is half luck, and maybe the healing doesn't really take any skill, and maybe teleporting doesn't really take any skill, and maybe Suzu basically never takes any skill. Maybe I'll grant you all that. But then maybe you'll say, well, even if it is half luck, that half skill that kunai's has is so difficult, just so challenging, that it still justifies that KIRIKO is not one of the lowest skill characters in this game. But here's the final nail in the coffin for me. I would call Moira a lower skill character than KIRIKO if it weren't for one thing that Moira does have to respect to some extent, but KIRIKO doesn't. Support positioning rules. You know, in the recent past, there's a question I've been asking myself a lot when it comes to Overwatch. If I'm the kind of person who cares a lot more about strategizing and positioning than aim mechanics, then surely I should be a tank player, not a support player. I mean, I do play both a lot, and I'm pretty close on both of them, but I always end up with a little bit more support playtime than tank. And while Anna was my first love with this game when it comes to characters, so maybe that makes sense, at the same time, it kind of feels a bit weird, you know? Even Anna herself is a character who's relatively aim-dependent when it seems like the characters I'm most repulsed by in this game are characters that are quote-unquote all aim, no brain. I've always thought to myself, well, while I clearly still like playing my fair share of tank, why is it that I never play as much tank as I do support? And I think the answer I came to is that support has very unique rules for positioning that I simply think are the most sort of, for lack of a less pretentious phrase, intellectually satisfying mechanics in the game. Because as a DPS, the rules on positioning, while they still apply to you, are relatively loose. And as a tank, the rules on positioning are much stronger, but they are tethered a little bit by your supports. Meanwhile, as a support, you probably have the most to think about in terms of positioning. In a normal shooter, all you would be trying to do is trying to take a position where you either have a good angle on the enemies or you have a lot of cover. Ideally both if you can somehow get a mix. But in the case of supports, you've got to figure out how to find a position where you have cover from enemy fire, but also line of sight to allies. And that creates a lot of new sort of dynamics, a lot of unique positions that any other character wouldn't be able to get a lot of value out of, that a support can get a lot of value out of. When you combine that as well with the fact that supports are easily the most valuable members of the team to keep alive, and the people who should be doing the most to keep their deaths down if you want to win, meaning that you're encouraged to play safe with your positioning and play smart, that means that I really appreciate all the mechanics that go into support positioning. And it's why I don't really think, for the most part, cough cough, any support really is brainless to play. Even a support like Moira, who verges on brainless, while she doesn't have to respect the rules of support positioning as hard as most characters like Anna or Zen, she at least, while she can use Fade to get away, can never go so far away that she isn't a fade away from safety. If Moira ever goes so deep that she can't get back with one fade, then she's screwed. So yes, she has different positioning to supports with less mobility, but she still has support positioning. She's allowed to stray a little bit from the areas of the map that she should be standing in if she wants to help her teammates, but she's not allowed to just yeet herself into the enemy backline with no plan and then use Fade to bail her out. It can only go so far, and if where it goes doesn't put her back in a safe space, then that's it for her. Not to mention, at the very least, Moira has to consider that wherever she places herself needs to be somewhere where she's close enough to her teammates that her heal spray can reach. And then there's KIRIKO. Oh boy. Thanks to teleport, KIRIKO does not have to obey a single rule of support positioning. The vast majority of supports in the game have to play far back but at a range where they can still heal. But for KIRIKO, the opposite is true. If you try and heal from far back, you might be playing it safe and quote-unquote smart by the standards of any other support, but for you, you actually get less value. Because your healing takes time to travel to the target, it's more likely that the target will die before the healing reaches them, even if the healing hasn't been reduced. Not to mention, no one ever pays attention to that KIRIKO healing them. I swear to God, I used to play KIRIKO like I played Anna and constantly heal from far back, and I swear to God, I learned to kick that habit pretty quickly, even though it should be the quote-unquote smart way to play her, because everyone would just run around and steer all the healing Ofudas into walls so that none of them would get healed. As a result, while you can heal from a distance, you are heavily encouraged to just teleport on top of people and heal directly into their face hole, which only further reduces the aim actually required to heal as KIRIKO when there wasn't much to begin with in the first place. The fact that you're encouraged to play this up close also makes your Suzus basically automatic. You don't have to aim them, you just throw them into the back of the tank you're already staring at. The fact that you're this far forward also means you can finally start landing some kunais now, because the closer you get to your enemies, the more the balance between it taking luck or skill tips more in your favor if you're a good player with your kunais. It's always got a little bit of luck involved, but when you do get real close to them and the travel time of those kunai starts to get really, really short, it does start to become more about aim than it does about blind luck. So, KIRIKO is a support who, unlike every other support in the game, who for the most part has to play further back, and even the supports who do have to get close to heal people like Moira, clearly aren't intended to be close at all times. They clearly are given the escape tools they have, like Fade, to compensate for situations where they have to get out of there. But then you have KIRIKO. You can't land shots consistently unless you're up close, so you need to get up close. You can't heal people consistently unless you're up close, so get up close. Your Suzus are much less likely to land if you don't get up close, so get up close. This encourages you to just flail around in the face of your tank or flail around in the face of the enemy backline, and then just use your get out of jail free buttons whenever you're about to actually be punished for it. Oh, what? I wasn't supposed to jump into the enemy spawn, miss 10 kunais in a row, wall climb out of there, and then teleport away? Well, oh well. I mean, I might have missed every shot, but it doesn't matter. I pressed the teleport button and now I'm out. They didn't get a kill for it. They wasted a bunch of cooldowns trying to chase me. Even trade. The fact that KIRIKO doesn't have to respect any rules of positioning, something that's otherwise a baseline skill that even the lowest skill characters in the game have to have some knowledge of. Even if you play fucking Orisa or Reaper, the one thing that actually takes skill about characters like those is you still have to care about positioning. And then there's KIRIKO. And people will argue that this is actually a reason why KIRIKO takes a lot of skill. Because if a Kiriko does disregard all the rules of support positioning, does throw herself into the enemy backline with no plan, does miss all her shots, and does have to TP out, yeah, sure, maybe you didn't kill her, but dude, you still got value. Dude, that Kiriko was out of the fight for a good few seconds. They weren't doing anything for their team that time. Oh man, and they had to use all their cooldowns. They had to use their Suzu and their Swift Step. Those are valuable cooldowns, and you had to get them out. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying this is completely wrong. I do agree that you are going to do worse as a Kiriko if you end up burning all your cooldowns by throwing yourself at the enemy backline constantly. In fact, I think it's actually more indicative of you being a bad Kiriko than anything else if you find yourself never being able to Suzu your tank when you need it because you keep putting yourself at death's door and using the Suzu to bail yourself out rather than your teammates. That is true. Counterpoint, it's not always true, and even it not always being true, I already think is bad enough. Once again, if people actually bother to use their cooldowns to chase you down as a flanking Kiriko, then once you teleport out, there's a decent chance that wasn't actually a negative trade for you. Even if you missed every shot, if the response was for the enemy tank to be like, oh shit, there's a Kiriko flanking my supports, I'm going to explode if my supports die, I can't have that Kiriko doing that, I'm going to have to back out of the fight for a moment and jump back to peel for my supports. And let's say they're a Doomfist and they use Seismic Slam to jump back for their supports, and then they try and punch you, but then you use Teleport to get away. Not only did you force out the Doomfist Seismic Slam and punch, meaning he has no mobility now, but you also just took their tank out of the fight, meaning they have no front line now, and they are going to be forced to lose a bunch of space, and maybe even have a couple people die that don't get out fast enough, all because that Doom had to run back to peel for you. And you might say, oh, well, that's the Doom making a misplay then, because they should just ignore the Kiriko. But here's the thing, how does that Doom know if you're a good or bad Kiriko? They have no way of knowing. If you're a good Kiriko and that Doomfist just ignores you in the back, then you just double headshot both of his supports, and he's got zero support, he jumps in and he explodes, and then he gets flamed. This is a big reason why I hate Kiriko so much, is because since so much of whether you just land kunais or not is fucking luck, it leads to situations where nothing is the correct play. It's literally just, something's going to happen, it's going to go one way or the other, there's literally no way of knowing which way it's going to go, you'll know if you made the wrong decision afterwards, and it won't even be a thing you can learn from, it'll just be a thing of, shit happens sometimes. For that Doomfist in that situation, again, he's damned if he does, damned if he doesn't 50% of the time. Peeling is the wrong option if the Kiriko misses, but actually continuing to push in is the wrong option if the Kiriko doesn't miss. And not only does he have no way of knowing if the Kiriko is the kind of Kiriko who hits all their kunais, but on top of that, even if they are the kind of Kiriko that hits most of their kunais, again, there's always an element of luck, and there's always a chance that that Kiriko just misses their shots. Because her kill potential has a ludicrous amount of variance and luck involved, combined with the fact that she has a bunch of get-out-of-jail-free buttons, there is no situation where a response to a Kiriko flanking your back line is always correct. I don't even mean that in a way of like, oh, circumstances can change. No, the circumstances can be the same, except maybe the Kiriko just lands one more kunai, and now the correct play becomes the incorrect play. And again, as the Doom, who can't even fucking see the Kiriko right now, who probably can only hear her footsteps, but doesn't even know exactly where she is, how do I know if she's landing the kunais or not? I don't, and there's no way I could know. Beyond that, I hear some people argue that the reason Kiriko is so hard is because you don't know when you fucked up. Because sometimes you'll go for the backline and get the right result, and sometimes you'll get the wrong result, and even when you get the wrong result, because you won't die for it, someone else will die for it because you didn't have Suzu. It's like, oh man, you know, it's difficult, man. You don't know when you fucked up unless you're paying close attention. And don't get me wrong, I guess I half agree with that. But also, as I just said, I think a lot of the reason it's so hard to tell when you fucked up is because half of it is just fucking luck. Genuine just luck. Not even like, oh, you know, you should have known that this would hold. There's a bunch of factors you just literally can't know what they will be in a normal game of Overwatch, no matter how good you are with awareness and game sense. And if you don't know those factors, you're just going to have to take a guess sometimes, and sometimes you'll just be fucking wrong. Or sometimes you'll be right. But then just miss your kunais. You were aiming in the correct spots, but the enemies just acted really fucking weird and pressed buttons in a weird order that most people don't usually do when they panic. So as a result, even if you threw the kunais exactly where people would usually move their heads when they panic, if this one guy is just a bit weird, and when he panics, he presses W quickly and then stops and then like looks around a bit and then presses like S a bit and then D instead of going 80-80 strafing, if that's what happens, then maybe you just don't kill anyone, even if you're good at kunais normally. Not to mention, if we get back to the whole skill thing again, because I know we went on a bit of a tangent here, because there's such ludicrous variance in how effective kunais are, and because there's no way for you to know if that Kiriko will or will not hit their kunais, it means that Kirikos even get value out of the threat that they might land a kunai, regardless of whether they actually ever land a kunai. Sometimes I will just force a support off of the high ground because I didn't actually land a kunai on them. I missed. I did shit. I missed my kunais. But I wall climbed up there and I scared them off. Even though I didn't land my kunais, they didn't know I was going to miss. And hey, if I do hit, they die. So they have to jump off high ground. And then, oh, that support dies because they jumped off high ground and someone got them on low ground. And oh, hey now that the support's gone, their tank's crumbling, and holy shit, the whole team fell apart. And the whole team fell apart because I wall climbed up to the high ground. I didn't even have to land a kunai. I just had to look scary and look like I was going to land a kunai. I missed all my kunais. Didn't matter. We still won that team fight because I looked at Anna menacingly. And can you even tell that Anna that she made a misplay by jumping off of high ground there and dying as a result? Because she has no idea if I'm about to land the next kunai. If she stays on high ground, maybe I just randomly get 2 headshots in a row after missing like 7 shots, and then she just explodes. Literally, no matter what decision you make, you will never have made the correct one. You are damned if you do, damned if you don't. Anytime you win a duel as Kiriko and anytime you lose a duel as Kiriko, it's usually decided more by luck than anything else. Just as a follow-up, I was listening back to this and I wanted to add this little bit in because I realized that I got a bit swept up in the rant and I didn't actually get to the point I meant to get to with this whole sometimes you just fuck up and it's just luck thing. Because I feel like, in fact, I did actually make a bit of a weak argument here because there's 3 points to this and I said 2 of the 3 points and I forgot to say my third point, which I think is my strongest point. Obviously, point 1, just as a genuine thing, no matter how good you are, sometimes things are going to happen in the game that you won't be aware of because you literally could not see or hear it and it's not just a your bad thing. Point 2, obviously, you're not going to land all your kunais even if you have perfect like kunai aim, quote unquote, and perfect kunai logic. Sometimes people are just going to act weird in reaction to what you do. And you're not going to have any way of predicting what they're going to do, and as a result, you won't be able to predict where you're supposed to shoot to hit your kunais. But the big one here that I think is the strongest point is something that I think most people do know, but a lot of people act like isn't true. That being that forcing out cooldowns, while valuable as a general rule, does not have any inherent value in it. If I, as a Kiriko, go flank the enemy backline, start throwing some kunais, maybe land a couple, but not get any kills. And I force out, let's say, Anna tries to sleep me, but misses. Then the Anna nades herself. And then I can't kill her because she naded herself. But hey, at least she used both sleep dart and nade, and now I get to TP out. And hey, I just used TP. Hey, I won the cooldown trade. I might have gotten 0 kills, and I might have been out of the fight for a bit, but I forced out 2 critical cooldowns that decide fights sometimes, anti-nade and sleep dart, and I only traded for it a 7-second cooldown of my own in Swift Step. A lot of people like to do this sort of calculus to justify, you see, this is why Kiriko actually takes loads of skill. It's assessing these cooldown trades, all these resources that you're going to force out of the enemy team by applying pressure. And don't get me wrong, there is some strategy in there. However, here's the thing. There is 2 different worlds after that happens. There is the world where actually, yeah, I did get value out of that cooldown trade, where my team pushes in after I fail to kill the Anna, and because the Anna has no cooldowns, the enemy tank explodes, and without a tank to protect them, we then get to mow down the enemy supports, and before you know it, the whole team collapses like a house of cards. And you could make a strong argument that, hey, even though you didn't get the kill technically, you're the reason why the whole enemy team fell apart, and if you didn't force out those cooldowns on the Anna and force them to waste them using only one of your own cooldowns, then your team wouldn't have won that team fight. And don't get me wrong, that can happen sometimes. Sometimes is the underlined bit. You see, it's only valuable to force out sleep dart and nade if your team actually decides to push in before she gets sleep dart and nade back in 12 seconds. However, if your team decides to spend the next 12 seconds mulling around like, yeah, I don't know if we want to go in or not. Oh, what's our Kiriko doing? Oh, why is she going into the back line? Oh God, where's she going? Or if your team is like, oh, look at our Kiriko feeding. Let's just back out of this fight and wait for other people to respawn. She's going to die anyway, so we'll see her back at spawn. If either of those things happen, you quite literally get 0 value out of forcing out all of Anna's cooldowns. Because by the time you actually can capitalize on it, oh, she's got them back. In this scenario, all you really did was spend about 10 or 15 seconds of the game not contributing. This is the argument that most people make for Kiriko being a difficult character, that you have to know when you're going to get value for going in and applying pressure to the backline and when you're not going to get value. And since sometimes you will just get unlucky and not get the kill on kunais, you've got to be able to still get value out of the situation even if you don't get a kill by forcing out cooldowns and then capitalizing on the cooldowns that the enemy team doesn't have. And when you put it all like that, it all sounds very big brain, but I'm going to be real. While this is something that is probably a consistent skill at high level play and actual coordinated like Overwatch League games and all that, if we're talking just normal Overwatch, just solo queue, quick play or competitive, let's be real. That's not how it works. You could force out every single fucking support cooldown the enemy team has in the space of about 5 seconds and then TP out and still get 0 value for it if your team isn't also pushing in at the time that you're applying this pressure. This is also a big reason why it's kind of a stereotype for dive tank players to kind of be like ego and toxic, you know, ball, doom players, etc. I'm not saying it's good that they're like that, but I fully understand why they're like that, because you become a fucking pariah of every game you enter, regardless of how good you actually are at the character. And that's because, especially with dive tanks, sometimes you really will do a lot for your team, but still get fucked. Sometimes you will jump the enemy backline, force out the attention of basically their entire team, force out all their cooldowns, just barely die on the way out, even though you did have a good escape plan and you nearly made it, but you just barely got caught just before you got behind the wall. And it doesn't matter if you forced out like 8 cooldowns going for that dive. If your team's response is then to be like, lol, doom fed, let's wait in spawn for him to respawn, rather than, oh, hey, look, the entire enemy team has 0 cooldowns, and if we just walk in right now, even though we don't have a tank, we can still probably fucking mow them down. Then it won't matter, you will have put in all that effort and gotten 0 value for it. Not to mention, even if your team does push in and you do get value for it, that's value that the scoreboard can't show. And while, don't get me wrong, this isn't the end of the world, it does lead to teammates blaming you even if you're doing a lot for your team. I do feel like I am morally obligated to quickly throw in a quick, just for the people who are going to misinterpret this and take it too far. Even still, if you're playing someone like Doomfist, Ball, Winston, whatever, you should be getting more elims and deaths and blah, blah, blah. It is rough for you. Sometimes you'll just get a rough game on those characters and you'll be doing everything you can and your team will just not be helpful. But by the same token, don't instantly assume it's your team's fault if you're doing bad and you're playing these characters, because while they do have a lot of issues with cooldowns making it look like they're doing less than they actually are on the scoreboard, on the other hand, they also have the ability to get loads more elims than they kind of deserve sometimes, just because of the fact that they're so good at dealing bits of damage to multiple people. So that means that one Doomfist Seismic Slam could hit 4 people, and that's only 50 damage, and you might like not continue fighting the other 3 people and just focus one of those 4 people. But if the rest of the team swoops in and kills the other 3 people, that counts as 4 elims for you, even though you only really did the work to kill 1 person. Oh boy, we're getting a bit off topic now, but I felt like I had to quickly throw that bit in there just so that I wouldn't be on the hook for explaining to everyone else why now there's a bunch of wrecking balls running around that are going 0 and 8 and blaming their teams and being like, oh, well, actually, it's because you're not taking advantage of all the cooldowns I'm forcing out. Look, I forced out Reinhardt pin. How else do you think that I fell off the map as Ball? Okay, anyway, Jesus Christ, this has been long enough. Getting back to the original recording. Okay, so I think I've made my point. I really do think that Kiriko is not only the single most miserable character in the game to play against with essentially no real counterplay, but I also think she's not even particularly fun to play herself. I genuinely think, for as much as people like to joke about Mercy being spectator mode, I think that's hilarious that people think Mercy is spectator mode. Because at least Mercy has Guardian Angel movement and her pistol. Kiriko is playing on spectator mode. Holy shit. You really just hold right click on people. You just keep holding right click. And oh, I'm about to be in danger. If I was a Mercy right now, I'd have to quickly think, okay, where are my teammates? Can I use these different angles I have for Guardian Angel based on these teammates to use my movement mechanics to be able to get out of this dangerous situation? As Kiriko, I go, oh, press Q. Oh, I'm out. Oh, and to clarify, I rebind my buttons. Q isn't my ult for me. Q is my teleport. So, with all that said, how the fuck do you fix this train wreck? Well, I've thought about this for a while. I think this is the reason why I held off on this KIRIKO rant for so long, because I've wanted to make this since Season 3. That, combined with the fact I don't usually like to make these super negative videos where I just complain, especially where it can sometimes make some players feel targeted. But I feel like with this character, it's just so important I have to say it. But I really do think another reason why I've held off on this video for so long is it feels like it's not satisfying just talking about all the reasons why Kiriko's so bullshit to play against and so unfun to play as, why she takes so much enjoyment away from the game, but then not really have an answer, except just honestly fucking scrap the character and start over. And I will say this, I do think that's the perfect world. Genuinely, I think Kiriko is such a fucked design from step one that, like, the best you could do is start over. But also, let's be real, that is never happening. So considering that's never happening, what is the Kiriko rework that would try and make her a little bit better? Well, most of these ideas I already had a while ago, but most of them didn't really, I feel, fix my major concerns enough yet. However, just recently, I had one last idea, which I really feel like was the final puzzle piece to fit everything together. And now I can look at this rework and think, this still has problems, but by God, would this be 100 times better than what we have right now? So, I guess this is my Kiriko rework. First of all, I guess let's get the unpopular one out of the way first, because I don't think this one will be received super well, but I also think it's what needs to be done. I think kunais were not a good idea. We can keep kunais as the weapon, but their whole gimmick of triple damage for headshots, we already had to downsize that to 2.5 times damage to make it even close to balanced, and it's still an issue. I think we just gotta bite the bullet and say, okay, triple damage headshots were a mistake. I feel like kunai should do 50 damage and have a 2 times headshot multiplier like most bullets do. This still means you can 2-tap, however now, a 2-tap would be 200 on the dot, meaning that if they have more than 200 or receive any healing in between, they need more than 2 kunais to be killed. However, body shots now do more damage than they used to. So that means that you have more decent poke on someone if their head hitbox is completely inaccessible to you. I would be fine with trying 2.25 times headshots, but I just feel like, you know, at that point, it feels like it's getting weirdly specific, and it's like, we're just doing this for the sake of doing it, aren't we? Like, I don't have a problem with the idea of kunais with 2.25 times headshot multipliers. I just feel like, you know, what's most likely is we'll discover that we need to reduce it to 2 times anyway. And it's like, well, at that point, what's the point? I know that it seems way less spicy not having the triple damage headshots, but I mean, like, we can already see they were a mistake. They've already technically been removed. It's not even triple damage headshots anymore currently in the game. Even double damage kunai headshots, if kunais do 50 damage like I suggest, meaning that they do 100 damage for a headshot, would still be terrifying. You can still 2-tap people. It's hardly like Kiriko would be dead without triple damage headshots. She's got more than enough strengths other than that. I realized that healing Ofuda's being the only method of healing that is both projectile and takes time to reach its target, but also homing is something that's unique to it, and it's probably made the way it was just for the sake of being a different feel to it and all that, and not feeling like any other healing. But realistically, it's not a fun thing, is it? Like, do you like the fact as Kiriko that your healing Ofudas sometimes, even though you aim them correctly, home towards someone who then runs behind a wall and steers them all into the wall, gets 0 healing, and then flames you for not healing them because they didn't see that they steered all your healing Ofudas into a wall and it's their fault they didn't get healed? Like, no one enjoys this interaction. The tank doesn't enjoy that because they died because they didn't get healed, and they didn't see it's because they steered the Ofudas into the wall. The Kiriko doesn't enjoy that because they're getting blamed for it when they didn't do anything wrong. It's just a shitty thing to make them do in the first place. Not to mention, the whole homing thing reduces the skill expression of them. So I feel like healing Ofudas could stay a projectile, however they should move through the air much faster. They'd still have a travel time, but they should travel extremely quickly and not have any homing. This way you will have to aim where your teammates are going rather than they are right now, but only about a step or 2 ahead or behind them from most distances. And the fact that they travel faster means that they won't be steered into walls as often as they are right now. Not to mention, not having the automatic homing means you actually would have to aim. Alright, here's where things get spicy then. Wall climb. Now you might think wall climb doesn't really need touching. I mean, it's fine, right? It makes sense, all the Shimadas wall climb, and I guess Kiriko is one of them. But to be honest, I don't like Kiriko having wall climb. It further adds to the whole she doesn't have to care about support positioning thing. because the fact that she can wall climb means that she doesn't even have to respect high ground. Even if she could teleport to escape for free at any time, at least if she couldn't get high ground for free at any time, then she would have to at least consider, well, if enemies are going to try and escape to high ground, I won't be able to continue chasing them. Or if I'm not on high ground, then I won't have an escape route. But no, they give her wall climb, essentially allowing her to get high ground for free anytime, anywhere. It's also her only real form of mobility, which I think is kind of shit for a ninja. I mean, especially considering it's vertical only. It's not horizontal mobility. KIRIKO is literally slower than Brig. Actually, at least Brig has shield bash. KIRIKO cannot get around faster than a Brig can, which is really stupid when you think about it. So I propose replacing the wall climb passive with another passive that I think will be in a similar flavor, but far, far more fun and skill expressive. Instead, giving her a wall jump passive. Now, I actually want this passive to do two things. Well, I guess these are two separate passives, but you could put them under one. Because essentially, both of these things are supposed to feed into her whole, she's supposed to be a ninja, she's supposed to be like lightweight and fast. The first thing is, I think like Genji and Tracer, she should just move 15% faster than all of the characters while walking. I mean, I don't really see why she wouldn't be as fast as Genji if she's one of the smallest characters in the game and she's a ninja. They very much paint her as a very athletic character, and it's weird that she moves like she eats too much McDonald's when you actually play her. But more importantly, the wall jump. So we kind of already have this with Lucio's wall ride, but clearly it wouldn't be the same thing, although I imagine they could recycle some code here. Essentially, if you jumped at a wall and kept holding jump as KIRIKO, you could stick to the wall for a brief moment. You can only stick to it for like a second, maybe half a second, so you can't stick to it long. And if you press jump again while you're stuck to it, then you'll bounce off that wall, getting a small speed boost with the initial jump, and also launching yourself away from the wall, whether you face that direction or not. So if you're in an alleyway and you stick to the left wall, even if you're facing left, if you press jump, you'll shoot to the right. Generally, I want these wall jumps to move in a sort of diagonal motion where you do have some influence on which direction you're going by the way you're facing, but mostly will be going sort of diagonally forward or diagonally backwards. Obviously, usually you won't be able to wall jump off the same wall over and over and over. You'd slowly lose height as you were going. However, if you can find two walls close enough to each other, you can just keep wall jumping off of them and going and going and going. And as I say, since you get a small initial speed boost when you first do a wall jump, similar to a Lucio wall ride, that means that this is a way you could get around faster by jumping off of the walls constantly, while also, of course, making yourself difficult to hit. Now, doesn't that instantly make this character way, way cooler? Imagine how sick it's going to feel wall jumping off the side of the Numbani buildings while kunai headshotting people on the point. Not to mention, while clearly support positioning's never going to be the same so long as she has teleport, she would have more positioning knowledge involved in her because of the fact that her wall jump is only super effective in areas where you can find two close enough walls to wall jump off of. If you're in a spot where there's only one wall to wall jump off of, or even no walls, then you have restricted mobility, and that's something you constantly have to be aware of as KIRIKO. So while KIRIKO's positioning would certainly be nothing like any other supports, she would at least have positioning knowledge involved in playing the character, instead of, well, I could obey the rules of positioning, or I could just constantly use my teleport button as an instant bailout. Alright, so here's the big one. Swift Step. Now, funnily, for as much pain and agony as Swift Step has caused us, I actually think the way you fix Swift Step, if you're not just going to outright remove it, is really, really fucking easy. No joke. Do you want to know what I think you have to do? Just give it a long cast time. That's it. Just give it a long cast time. Because right now, if you didn't know, it does have a cast time. It's not instant. I won't blame you if half of you didn't even know that was a thing. But yes, KIRIKO's Swift Step actually does have about a half-second cast time. And if you are very unfortunate, it is possible for you to use Swift Step as KIRIKO, get stunned by something like an Orisa Spear or a Sigma Rock in that extremely tiny window and lose your Swift Step without teleporting. You very rarely see this because while there is actually a relatively long window where you haven't yet teleported but you are currently still casting Swift Step, for most of that window, you also get invincibility frames, which means you can't be stunned out of it or killed while doing it. However, I would like to add that if you didn't know, invincibility frames don't work against the death plane if you're falling to your death. So it's possible as KIRIKO to die while in your invincibility frames if you're falling into the death plane. I've just seen one or two KIRIKOs who try and do some kind of sneaky play where they jump off the map and plan to teleport back on. And oftentimes it's because they're used to the timing not being quite that strict, because of the fact that usually they get those invincibility frames, but they don't realize those invincibility frames don't work against the death plane at the bottom of the map. Just an interesting tidbit on the side while we were talking about this. Either way, I say ditch all the invincibility frames on Swift Step and just make it so that it takes like a second and a half to cast. Now you might be thinking, whoa, that is cruel. What, you just got to stand still for a second and a half? No. Although I already think that wouldn't be that cruel if you gave Kiriko other buffs, considering that I thought that teleport sounded like a cool idea as a support just for the sake of regrouping with your team and correcting positioning and, making sure that you could get an angle on someone when otherwise it wouldn't be possible. So I personally would be fine. I think it'd still get plenty of use, even if it had that longer cast time. You just wouldn't use it mid-fight, which I don't want people using it mid-fight as a free escape. Either way, that's not the end of the story either. I still think you should be able to use teleport to get out sometimes, and this is how I'm going to do it. Although it's going to have a 1.5, maybe 2 second cast time, which is obviously a long cast time, while casting it, you can still do other things. I'm going to make it so that while you're casting it, you just have to be doing the hand motion. As a result, while that means you can't be throwing Suzus, Kunais, or Ofudas, you can still be running around and wall jumping all over the place. So essentially, you can't be fighting or healing anyone while casting it, but you can still move around just fine. And considering your small hitbox, your fast move speed, and the ability to wall jump I introduced earlier, that means that you'll be able to do these frantic wall jumps to dodge around while you're casting it and hopefully still get out. But this time, it won't just be I press the button and I get out. It'll be I press the button, and then whether I survive the next 2 seconds or not depends on my movement mechanics being good. Not to mention, I'd also like to add a couple quality of life changes that make it so there's more knowledge and counterplay around Swift Step. I would want to make it so that Kiriko starts glowing blue the second that she starts casting it, so that you know when she's about to Swift Step away, which means that you either have to know you have the ability to commit onto the Kiriko and kill her within the next 2 seconds before she disappears, or you wouldn't waste your time trying to commit onto the Kiriko because you could see they're about to teleport away and be like, okay, we are not getting the kill on them in that short amount of time. Let's just let them get out and not waste any of our time on it. Another thing that Kiriko can do that's really shitty is if you're playing with a Sombra, Kiriko can teleport to the Sombra even if she's invisible. And while sometimes it can fuck over the Sombra by revealing her when she was hidden, because obviously if a Kiriko appears out of nowhere next to you, that probably means that there was a Sombra next to them, so maybe you can find them in invis and kill them. Most of the time, that's not what happens. Most of the time, this is used to just drop a Kiriko on top of a sniper. They'll just be chilling out far in the enemy backline, and then suddenly a Kiriko just appears out of thin air to them because they can't see the Sombra they teleported to. Kunai dead. What I want to see is that when she's casting Swift Step, before she even teleports to that new location, a little blue glow appears at that location and a little sort of shing sound starts playing. So you'll start hearing a little bit of a sort of almost Mercy Res-like sound if you're that sniper scoped in, not realizing there's a Kiriko about to be teleported on top of you and be like, wait, that's a Kiriko teleporting sound. Hang on a minute, see the blue aura in the air and start running away before the Kiriko appears. And hey, maybe the Kiriko still kills you. I mean, it would still be that you don't have much notice, but at least if you're paying attention, it's not just, oh, this person appeared out of thin air on top of me and insta-killed me before I could even react. Cool. But honestly, while I had these ideas for a while, my main problem was just Suzu. I could not think of any way you could make Suzu work. The best I could think of was to make it simply a burst heal with cleanse that didn't grant invincibility. But I mean, even I have to admit, that's kind of boring. While I'm glad cleanse is in the game, clearly people think that the invincibility side of Suzu is more exciting, and even though it's cancer to deal with and adds so much negativity to the game, at the end of the day, it's certainly one of the few things you could argue takes a little bit of skill with Kiriko. Is like, oh, I guess you do have to use like 2 brain cells to know when to throw the Suzu so the invincibility comes down at the right time. Again, for most things, it's really easy, but I suppose at least with something like a Junkrat Riptire, when you don't know exactly when he's going to detonate it, it's a little bit more difficult to try and Suzu a Riptire or something like that. I considered the idea of a damage reduction Suzu rather than an invincibility Suzu, but even that just seemed a bit iffy, even though I do think it would fix a lot of my concerns. But I finally came up with something which I feel sounds more realistic to me, that I also think would be more fun. It's an idea that when I first thought of it, I thought probably wouldn't change much, but the more I thought it through, the more I realized, actually maybe that would change a lot. And this idea evolved a little bit over time, but let me just start with the first thought I had. What if Suzu no longer was a splash AoE effect? I was considering recently the fact that this game has so much AoE healing at the moment, and it's kind of frustrating how sometimes the entire enemy team at once can feel unkillable just because they're all getting healed at once by an AoE. And often we don't think of Suzu as an AoE heal, because often Suzu is thrown at one person, but it is an AoE heal. In fact, the fact it has a splash radius is a big reason why I feel like Suzu often doesn't really even take skill to land. Because not only are you usually throwing it at your tank, but you don't even have to really aim that hard at your tank. You can miss your tank and still land the Suzu on them just because it has a splash radius. So what if the Suzu not only had the shorter invincibility frames the last patch gave it, but also maybe didn't have any splash? It could only grant invincibility to the one target you threw it at, and it had to direct hit that target, and that would be the one person who got the cleanse and the invincibility. Initially I thought, okay, well that fixes some things. That fixes it completely shutting down Rampage because it would only save one person. And that fixes the whole, like, you know, sometimes a whole team's about to die, like in a grab, like I mentioned, and then you just throw one Suzu and the entire ultimate's shut down. It'd certainly help against a lot of these ultimates. And it would mean you'd have to at least put a bit more effort into actually landing your Suzus rather than just throwing them in the general direction of your tank. But I mean, you'd still get situations where KIRIKO would TP on top of one of your supports that, like, you're about to get a kill on the support and then KIRIKO just appears out of thin air. Bing! Oh, well, they're not dead anymore now. But then I remembered, well, hang on, we've already brought up the whole longer TP idea, so it wouldn't just be an out of nowhere KIRIKO appears, bing, Suzu. You would see the particle effect for KIRIKO about to appear, and you'd be able to consider, okay, do I think I can kill this support before that KIRIKO appears, or do I think I need to be getting out now because that KIRIKO is just going to Suzu their support, and I'm not going to get anything here? But then the last thing came together. Something I didn't even consider, something I didn't even mean that I'd done by having this idea. If Suzu doesn't have a splash radius, how can you Suzu yourself? You can't, right? Because you usually just throw your Suzu at the floor. I mean, you could throw it into the sky, but then it takes a while to come back down, and honestly, it'd be very difficult, even if you could do that, to have it land directly on top of yourself. And at first, I obviously thought this was a mistake, but then I realized, wait, isn't that kind of perfect? This version of KIRIKO wouldn't need Suzu anymore to be bailed out of jail free. Well, she also lost Swift Step as like an instant get me out. Now that she has better mobility, while already having one of the smallest hitboxes in the game with this wall jumping and faster move speed, that should be enough to be able to get away with not needing Suzu to keep herself alive as a bullshit I simply decide I'm not dead now by pressing this button. So already, I thought this felt like a really cool change. But let me expand on it a little more. This got me thinking, maybe I wouldn't even mind the idea of KIRIKO still being able to Suzu herself if it was a big skill thing that you had to set up in advance by throwing the Suzu into the air, remembering where you threw it, and then knowing that you can retreat back to that spot in a couple seconds and have it land back on top of you. Then you couldn't have it as an instant just, oh, press the button, okay, now I don't die. And for that reason, I thought, maybe KIRIKO Suzu would be fine in those circumstances. And so that got me thinking, what might be another change that could add some more skill expression and fun to KIRIKO would be for how far she throws the Suzu, how hard she throws it, to depend on how long you hold the button. Where a tap wouldn't throw it very far at all, and it would fall rather quickly. Meaning that even if you're in an indoor space, as long as the ceiling isn't too low, you would still be able to Suzu yourself by just lightly tapping the Suzu button and standing still where you threw it. But let's say it still takes about a second for the Suzu to go up and then back down, so you can't just instantly press it and get out of jail free. It's, well, if I can survive standing still here for a second, then I can have this land on top of myself and give myself a little bit of extra time here. But that would also help Suzu feel like less bullshit when used on other people as well. If the default throw distance of Suzu would be extremely short unless you spent some time charging up that throw, that means that you can only Suzu people from a distance if, well, you had the time to charge up the shot and then you got the right arc to land it perfectly. I think one of the worst aspects of KIRIKO is the fact she doesn't have to think ahead. Not saying that you can't do it and it might improve your gameplay a little, but a KIRIKO can kind of just play in the moment, never really planning ahead and get away with it because they can just any moment press TP, get out, any moment hit Suzu, save the life of someone who was about to die, regardless of whether you really knew they were about to be in danger. Once you see them hit critical, it's just press button, oh, now they're not dead. But if you actually have to wind up your throw a little bit to be able to get it to people a little bit further away, then maybe those people wouldn't get bailed out so much unless you knew what was about to happen to them ahead of time, at which point you're actually demonstrating some good game sense and skill. Now you might say, oh, but you'll just teleport on top of them like you do now instead. I mean, you already don't Suzu people far away often as Kiriko, because you just teleport to them. But as I said, Swift Step would have a cast time, so a lot of the times you wouldn't have time to teleport to them. In fact, if they're about to die and you're about to teleport to them, but it's going to be in 2 seconds time, you're likely putting yourself in a deadly situation if you try and teleport to them, where you likely die the second the teleport goes through. One last thing too, I'll be completely honest, I literally just thought of this now while I was talking about this idea. I think it'd be pretty cool as a small niche option to give the Kiriko the option to cancel her teleport. For one, in case she genuinely presses it on accident and realizes, oh shit, if I teleport there, I'm going to die. Wait, no, I don't want to teleport. But also, in the occasional weird situations, I imagine that could make for some weird big brain plays, where you can drive enemies away from an area without even having to put yourself in danger by faking them out and making them think you're going to teleport there and then cancelling it last second. Because as I said, they would see the blue glow to indicate you're about to teleport there, and then it just disappears. Not to mention, you could maybe do a similar thing where maybe if most of your teammates die in a team fight and the enemy tank runs up to you and starts trying to kill you, and you start trying to teleport away and they think, ah, shit, I'm not going to be able to kill you before you teleport away. I'm just going to bail out. And maybe he runs out of there. Maybe he, like if it's a Doomfist, maybe he just leaps out of there once he sees you teleporting, and then you just cancel teleport and stay there and start throwing kunais. Cheeky plays like that could be done as well. So yeah, already I think that version of Kiriko I'm describing would be miles better than the original. But there is one more thing I'd like to add here. Kitsune Rush. Now, I don't think this one is anywhere near as bad as an issue as the other ones, but I gotta say, Kitsune Rush disappoints me. Kitsune Rush was one of the most exciting things that Kiriko had at first. I always wanted a support that could make people shoot faster, because as much as that sounds like an obvious thing, it's never something that's been added to the game. And we technically got that with Kitsune Rush, only it was an ultimate, so it's not exactly the way I wanted it. I wanted it as an ability where, like, almost like a mercy beam, I guess, like a damage boost. Not literally like that, but, you know, something like that. And maybe on a cooldown instead of just an always there ability. But, oh well, like, okay. Well, another thing is being able to get abilities back faster. I always wanted a support that could help people get their abilities back faster. And now we have Kiriko's Kitsune Rush. But once again, it's an ultimate. So, And when you also factor in that it increases reload speed, and it also gives movement speed, I kind of don't like what they did with Kitsune Rush, because they introduced 3 different mechanics no support has ever been able to do before, which would have been really interesting all as standalone abilities for an entire support's identity. A support that makes you reload faster, shoot faster, or get abilities back faster. All 3 of these things would be interesting. And yet, by packing them all into an ultimate rather than a cooldown, which does all 3 of those things and give you movement speed on top of that all at once, kind of makes them all meaningless. So to explain what I mean, when you use Kitsune Rush, do you think, yes, okay, I see that we have a Roadhog on our team, and he has Hook, and he has Self-Heal with Take a Breather, and he also has Pigpen. Okay, I need to use Kitsune Rush so that he can get his Take a Breather back to regenerate faster so that he doesn't die during this team fight, so that he can get some hooks more often, because the Junkrat's already placed a trap here, but his hook is on cooldown because he just missed one, and this will give him his hook back faster so he can get back in there, and then he can get his Pigpen off cooldown so he can finish off the person while they're in the Junkrat trap. No, you don't do all this thinking ahead. You don't do all this like, I'm going to use my abilities to synergize with my team. You are like, oh, enemy team's there, our team's here, point is here, team fight, press the button to win the team fight for free. You know, that's Kitsune Rush. It's literally just, are we in a team fight? If yes, press button and win. And so, despite the fact that Kitsune Rush introduces 3 brand new mechanics never seen before on a support in one ultimate, it doesn't feel any different than a nano boost. And that's kind of disappointing, isn't it? So I propose that we make Kitsune Rush a little bit more focused. I would like to see Kitsune Rush lose the faster reload time and faster shooting speed, and later we could give that to another support down the line. I think it could keep the faster movement speed, because I do think that's kind of part of the ultimate. I do think it's important because sometimes you use Kitsune Rush to get onto a point in overtime before the overtime clock hits, so I'm fine with that. But let's make it so the most interesting part of the ultimate is actually, you know, the point of the ultimate. Let's make it so that when you use Kitsune Rush, all it does is give you faster abilities, but not faster reload times or faster shooting. And of course, because it's only abilities, that means we could get away with making it much faster.
Currently, it makes abilities come back twice as fast. On launch, it used to be 3 times as fast, but it got nerfed. Let's say, considering now its only abilities, that Kitsune Rush gives people their abilities back 4 times faster. That would be crazy, but it'd be crazy in a fun way. And it'd be crazy in a way that actually encourages some strategy. Not just, oh, we're in a team fight, slap down Kitsune Rush. More just actually think, okay, considering the teammates I have who are going to be in the Kitsune Rush and are able to do anything at this time, and considering the cooldowns they have available to them, do I think a Kitsune Rush here is valuable or not? And don't get me wrong, I understand that you might say, but hey, wait, the reason why Kitsune Rush does so many things at once is because if they didn't, there would be some characters in the game that just wouldn't get a lot out of Kitsune Rush. I mean, a Widowmaker isn't going to get shit out of a Kitsune Rush if it just gives her Venom Mine back faster. And I mean, I wouldn't fully disagree, but not only would I argue that 1, Widowmaker already gets jack shit out of Kitsune Rush as it is, but 2, I'd also argue that, so what? That's kind of intentional. If you use a Kitsune Rush on a character that doesn't get anything out of the abilities they get available to them thanks to the Kitsune Rush, I would say that's a misplay on the part of the KIRIKO. And I would say that now we're actually adding depth to the ultimate. We're actually adding a need for some level of game sense. So you can't just slap the ultimate on any old teammate and expect them to pop off. Do the cooldowns this teammate has that they would get 4 times more often in the Kitsune Rush actually help us in this team fight from the position we're currently playing? Not to mention, while there's certainly characters that will get more benefit from others, let's be real. The playing field is relatively even. I mean, aside from Widowmaker, is there really a character which truly gets no tangible benefit from a Kitsune Rush? I would agree there's characters that probably don't get as much. Torb getting his turrets back faster and his overload more often probably doesn't do a whole lot. Ash getting a bunch of coached guns and dynamite isn't nothing, but clearly it's not a big deal. But honestly, even the worst examples, Widowmaker's the only one that's truly awful, and Widowmaker's the only character that already didn't get much of a benefit from even old Kitsune Rush. So it seems to me like it'd be completely fine to just accept that there are a small handful of characters that don't get that much benefit from Kitsune Rush, and even those characters still get something. And there's going to be some characters that can go crazy in Kitsune Rush. I feel like it's going to be fun as hell seeing Doomfist go crazy in Kitsune Rushes with 1 second cooldown punches and 2 second cooldown Psychic slams. Just imagine the fun of that if you're the Doom player, just like slamming all over the place, zipping left and right, going fucking crazy. And remember, it is an ultimate, so I think that's fair. Especially considering the Kitsune Rush on its own doesn't do anything to help the Doom stay alive, it really only helps their offensive capabilities. I guess it gives them block more often, but let's not pretend that Doomfist block is a super powerful defensive ability. This last Kitsune Rush change isn't the most necessary. If I got everything on this list except the Kitsune Rush one, I would be relatively happy. I think the big ones, or the wall jump one would be the most important, I feel. I feel the basis of why KIRIKO can just never be balanced into being an okay character is the fact that the only way she can stay alive is get out of jail free cards because she has no movement skill. And again, I think it's a fucking crime that a fucking ninja support doesn't have any movement skill involved with them. Especially when we have characters like Mercy and Lucio, which have some of the deepest movement in the game that are also in the support category, who aren't Shimadas. Either way, I'm finally done. I'm done talking about KIRIKO. As I say, I put this off way too long, but I hope you like these rework ideas, and hopefully if you are a KIRIKO enjoyer who was maybe a little bit, who maybe felt a little bit called out at the start of the video, hopefully now you can at least see where I've been going with this, and I'm not just trying to be like, fuck you for playing KIRIKO. Although, as a side note, fuck you for playing KIRIKO. I'm sorry, man. KIRIKO just makes games so unfun. Either way, now that I've told you to go fuck yourself, I will now ask you to subscribe. Because did you know, only 2% of— Yeah, never mind, bye.